commence the meeting of the Public Safety Committee. And let's begin with introductions, and we can start with Mr. Peterson, who's got pizza in his mouth.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Forrest Dunbar.
Amy Dumboski.
Eric Cross.
Big Train.
Bill Evans.
Jack Frost, Code Enforcement.
Gary Gillum, APD.
Chief Tolley, APD.
Melinda Freeman, Department of Health and Human Services.
Rob Fitch, Office of Emergency Management.
Bill Fulton, Municipal Attorney.
Todd Sherwood, Municipal Attorney's Office.
Thank you all. We've got a pretty full agenda today, so I want to get started here quickly. First order of business is with APD and Chief Tolley. And specifically, Chief, we've asked you to give us some kind of update. I think the city is duly concerned about the level of violent crimes we've been seeing, whether it's anecdotal or statistical or whatever. Certainly the perception is that we have a problem, and we would certainly appreciate hearing from you what steps that you can tell us are being taken to address that.
Sure. The department wants the public to be informed and tries to get out as much information as they can, and we welcome this opportunity to share some information with you about crime over the past year. Regarding spring vehicle thefts and burglary spree, in mid-August, 4 men were charged with stealing vehicles and burglarizing 12 different businesses in Anchorage and Eagle River. And they were indicted on a 30-count indictment. These suspects were responsible for stealing thousands of dollars worth of property in the burglaries. Other vehicle theft and arrest charges, there have been 133 arrests made by APD through August, where the suspect was charged with vehicle theft in the first degree. In January, 31 vehicle theft arrests were made, followed by 21 arrests during each month of April and May. And this is the type of events that most of the public would be affected by. So, as far as homicides, in 10 cases, there have been charges and arrests made. In 3 cases, there are pending prosecution review, which would be like self-defense cases and so on. In 1 case, the suspect died. It was a murder, then suicide, so no charges were filed against that individual. And there are currently 7 unsolved cases where no charges or arrests have been made yet. Felony assaults and robberies. The majority of assaults and robberies are going to occur on highways, streets, alleys, almost 50%. 15% commercial buildings, 4% at gas stations and convenience stores, and only 14% of residents. Most residential robbery assaults are between parties that know each other. Extremely rare to have a random home invasion. We know that the majority of the residential robberies are often referred to as home invasions. 90 to 95% are between parties who know one another. Random home invasions strictly occur only once or twice a year. For continued up-to-date information, APD is publishing to Raids Online. The system is updated 3 times a day. This is police reports containing verified event information compared to the scanner or calls or services which do not verify an actual event that occur. And this Raids Online, not only is it calls that have been verified, officers responding to incidents and so on, but it's also those that are made by citizens through such as online reporting or coming into the station and things like that. Thank you.
Any questions for the Chief? Ms. Nabowski.
Chief, welcome back, Chief Gillum. Good to see you. So, Chief, when we're talking about the vehicle thefts, how many vehicle thefts have we had now up to this date?
I'd have to get you an actual count.
Give or take 100.
Neighbor Analyst knows. Do you have a count on vehicles roughly?
I don't have an exact count. We are definitely higher than we were last year, I can tell you that. But I wouldn't want to spit out a figure because...
The only reason I ask is because the last story I think I remember was like 550 or something, but I had somebody tell me a week or 2 ago that we were over 1,100 now. Is that accurate, or is that like an exaggeration?
I think that's an exaggeration.
Okay, if you could get back to me, I'm just curious. I want to make sure I put out.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to give you information.
That's okay. The other thing wanted to talk, follow up with you on is you were mentioning about home invasion. I'm gonna call that a home invasion because, you know, if somebody's in your house when you're sleeping, it's probably, they're not there for good reasons, I guess. So what is the breakover point between calling it a home invasion? Do they have to have a weapon to be a home invasion? Or what's the difference between somebody breaking into your home when you're there and classifying it as a home invasion?
So again, what I'd like to do is get you the actual statutes that define each of those crimes, when the difference between a robbery and a burglary. But basically, if a person is committing a crime by coming into your house with the intent of robbing you and assaulting you, then that makes it different than just a burglary. The burglary takes out the element of the human contact. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So a burglary, yes, a theft could become a robbery, for example, on the street when force is used or intimidation is used. But the best thing to do is let me give you the exact statute with the terminology, the legal definitions.
Sure. So that would be helpful. And the thing I'm thinking about is earlier this summer, we had a gentleman who somebody had went into his garage and he confronted them in the garage and the homeowner ended up getting shot. In that particular situation, obviously there was human contact. So I would assume then that would probably be a home invasion.
And you'd have to look at that, was this instigated by the suspect or the victim? And a crime that starts out in one fashion could actually evolve into something else, such as a citizen defending him or herself.
That's helpful. Another question, how are we coming on some of the homeless camps? Because I've had now 2 complaints about homeless camps in Eagle River. So are we still going through the same protocol as notifying APD where they're at, and then the captain or whomever is responding and giving notice?
We're very grateful for that information and going online and filling out the actual coordinates and so on, and that way we can follow up on it. Also, I know just this past week or so, they went out and did the other biannual survey where they walked the streets and tried to make a determination just where the city stands.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Train?
Chief, how big is the burglary unit? Your unit that addresses burglaries?
4 or 5. You know, I think it's 4.
Four. It should be 5 or 6, but they're understaffed right now. There's 4 individuals in that unit.
Do you know what it was a year ago or 2 years ago? Would you just find out and let me know? I want to see how many
It
we
has
used to
shrunk
have versus
significantly.
where we're at now.
Yes, sir.
So we can understand how many we need to get you guys to bring up to where it should be for a town this size. Because there's burglaries that happen all across Anchorage. We've got to figure out, we have dedicated people to try and solve the issue, or is it just, it's out of my house, not a problem now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Train, one of the things that APD does report on in their dashboard are the specialty unions and how they're manned, so we can kind of watch that, hopefully build up over time. Mr. Peterson, then Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I actually had a citizen ask me, since we've been having all these problems in parks with shootings, assaults, pepper spraying people and things like that, they're wondering if we have police officers that are on bikes in the summertime. And I told them I thought I'd seen officers on bikes, but I wasn't 100% sure if they were, whether they were official officers or what exactly their, position is. So I thought I'd ask you about it.
Good question. I myself got on a bike this summer and tried to get out on the trail some and see firsthand just what challenges were out there, as well as to see how we can improve what we do. We're real fortunate in that we have our school resource officers, and for the most part, that's fall through spring. And during the summertime, even though some of our school resource officers are responding to summer school and other school-related events, it leaves a few that have a little bit of extra time that we're able to put them on bikes and put them out there on the trail. By no means is it at a staffing level where we can give it the coverage we'd like to have and so on, but it is a great effort. We're also evaluating other ways to get specialized units or patrol officers on bikes and on those trails. And we're coming up with some ideas, but again, it's every time you do that, then you're taking away from another specialized unit and so on. But the citizens will see bikes on the trails.
And if I out there individually, or are there teams of two, or how are they working that?
Normally, they're in teams of 2.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Let the record reflect, we've been joined by Assemblymember Weddleton and Mr. Dunbar. I believe it's your question.
Thank you. Chief, could you remind me, when does the next academy class graduate? How large do you think the final class will be? And with anticipated attrition, which I know, is a rough count, how many officers do you think we'll end the year with?
So right now, we're at 387 officers. Approximately 50 of these officers are in some type of training phase. 29 are actually in this academy that's due to graduate in December. It's remarkable. Never seen anything like this. 29 started this academy, and so far 29 are still in it. And I'm really hopeful that we have a great bunch of individuals, very dedicated, and that our recruiting and screening process has really been perfected. That leaves the remaining individuals out of the previous academies that are in the field training phases. We recently had several of our laterals go solo, as well as some officers that were recruits that were in the field training that have prior law enforcement experience and did the field training phase really rapidly. But the vast majority of the individuals from each previous class will graduate from field training, go solo, probably within the next month to 6 weeks. So we also hope on December 19th to have another full academy. So I'm hoping 25 or so individuals that, which should put us over that 400 mark, which was a 2-year goal, hoping to hit that 2-year goal this year.
Assuming no retirements.
So we do, that is taking into consideration some retirements. I'm really happy to report over the past year, we've changed that rate. We've reduced it by about 50%. So officers seem to be happier in the workplace, not just the sworn officers, but also our unsworn. This is due to a lot of factors. Number one, getting leadership in the department in all the different areas and putting that leadership in place. And then trying to work on a systematic way of getting these units rebuilt. And it's a slow process because you just can't hire as many people as we need. You can't hire them quickly enough. And every time you put somebody in a specialized unit, that takes away from our patrol. So we're trying to keep that balance the best we can by not overburdening and leaving patrol short, beefing up the other units. We're proportionally growing each of these units in the department proportionally.
Thank you.
We've also been joined by Mr. Steele, Mr. Trainee, and then Mr. Vasquez.
Chief, are we getting enough vests for officers that they have to buy their own?
We purchased the vest, and we were having difficulty with some of the officers due to different body builds and things like that. And we recently procured a vendor that can provide the specialized vest and so on with more challenging needs for personalized vests.
And what are we doing about the gang unit that we used to have? Are we looking at rebuilding that?
That's an interesting thing, Mr. Trainee. There never really was a gang unit. We had an individual.
One guy that was the gang unit.
Correct. And we as a city are very fortunate in that we don't see the gang activities that many of the other cities in the lower 48 experience. And what I mean by that is gangs usually will come in and take over a street or a neighborhood and have territories and do things in the names of the gangs. Most of our gang affiliation is just that, affiliation, where an individual might have been arrested for a crime in the lower 48 and done time in the prison system and became acquainted with a group of individuals that associate as a gang. And then when they come back up here, they may continue with those contacts to provide them with drugs or guns or other elements to support the criminal activity. So most of this activity, even though there's some gang connections, it's not really being carried out on behalf of the gang in our city. We're very, very fortunate in that.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Vasquez.
Thank you. I'm going to start with, I think they're both easy questions, but we'll start with the one I think you can answer. When we're talking about drug activity, so obviously there has been either it's higher awareness or an escalation in drug activity. What, from a community perspective, I know the issues that we've had in the Eagle River, I've contacted APD. I don't hear anything that So the response I get when they knock on my door is I say, well, at 12:30 3 nights ago, I saw an APD cop parked right outside in front of the drug house, you know? Because I will effectively, I've become an assembly member who is a community patrol. I frequently, in the middle of the night, just drive around because I don't know what else to do, frankly. So there's a lot of neighbors that are interested in neighborhood watch and stuff like that. But when we have a suspected drug house in our community, or people, see a drug deal, obviously if you see something happening right now, you would call dispatch, right? But when they see something like that, what process can I tell them when you call and contact APD and you report the activity? What process can I tell them that APD goes through in order to either ring or follow through on the complaints that are being issued by the community?
So there's several points to be made there. And first of all, thank you very much for getting involved in your community and trying to help your neighbors, because this is what is so important for each and every one of us to do, is to help other family members and help their neighbors. And every time a call comes into the police department, that information gets recorded, and that information is then followed up on. If we have something that an activity is happening at the present moment, and license plate numbers are being provided, descriptions, and information that becomes actionable for the police department, they're going to make it a priority and try to respond to it. With that being said, if there was just a personal injury accident, or if there's a person who is using drugs or alcohol, and the safety or security of that individual because that person's lying on a sidewalk at a bus stop, whatever, those medical attention, those are going to become priority calls, as well as crimes of true violence where somebody's life or safety is at risk. So we're constantly balancing that. It's not unusual at certain times of the day, various days of the week and so on, that we go into what we call a stack system, where we just don't have enough officers to respond to the calls that are out there. And a call like that for a nuisance type thing becomes a low priority unless some real criminal activity is happening.
So nuisance being like somebody's dealing drugs in a house?
Correct.
So he's classifying that as a nuisance.
Again, is there guns being displayed? Are there guns being displayed? Are there people fist fighting? Or is there other things that deal with direct safety, immediate risk to the public? Those are going to take priority over the less crimes or incidents where emergency doesn't exist. But we will get to those calls, and it becomes very important to have that information. And a lot of time it's done through a networking system and so on, where officers will get initial information, do what they can, make their observations, complete an entry in the system, and then others in the department will follow up on it, such as specialized units, such as your vice unit and things like that.
So does it help for you, for example, if a neighborhood is pretty much convinced there's a house that's selling drugs on their street, does it help for you to have the neighbors take, have video, have photos, have license plates of cars that are coming and going? I mean, what would help you? I mean, I know you said if there was an accident to get that kind of information, but is there anything that a neighborhood can do to kind of expedite the information that APD can use that could actually be actionable? Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. What I can do to tell you is that our most effective tool is AMC 880. What we do is, if you can imagine the calls for service that you're getting about a known drug house, it may be suspected drug house, it may not really be a known drug house. People may be using inside there, whether or not it's a sale. And then you may know, you've been around long enough here to know that it takes a while to do a drug investigation. We have to get inside, we have to make buys. The most effective tool is to deal with the calls for service. We get there, and most of these are rentals, and we can use AMC 880 to basically evict, have the owner evict those individuals, and the problem goes away. It may go somewhere else, but it's harder. The more often that these individuals get evicted because of their criminal behavior or bad behavior, then most owners of buildings or landlords are starting to pick up, and you're a risk. So it diffuses the issue. By far, AMC 880 has helped us with these suspected or known drug deals far more than a criminal investigation. Because a criminal investigation, you do all that work, the individual may or may not be past the initial bail hearing. They may be released on their own recognizance, waiting for a trial date. The behavior doesn't go away, the problem doesn't go away, the citizen doesn't see the change. But with an eviction under AMC 880, then it's an immediate almost. So it's far easier.
But it takes the whole community coming together. And for example, the community could ask the questions, who does that house belong to? Or is it being used for lawful purposes and so on? And maybe the citizens of the community could take their own action over matters such as how the property's being used. You know, can it be used as a rental? Are they talking to one another? And perhaps the owner of that house isn't aware of what the home's being used for. So we want to try to help in as many ways as we can as good neighbors and family members.
That's a great idea. My last question, which I suspect you probably can't answer, and I don't want you to give information obviously that would be jeopardize any sort of investigation. But obviously with the higher number of unsolved murders in Anchorage, people keep asking me if there's a serial killer in Anchorage. So what can you tell us about the current investigations of unsolved murders, if they're related, if you can tell us? And what role is the FBI actually playing with helping the APD?
So we for years have not been able to have the necessary resources to just deal with things ourselves. And we have to rely on partnerships out in the community. And these partnerships will be the FBI, the DEA, and other federal agencies, as well as the troopers and neighboring police departments. Crime is no longer confined to just our city block, to our neighborhood, to the municipality. It extends into other communities, as well as to other states, and quite often internationally. So it's a common practice to network with one another and work on incidents. Perfect example is the auto thefts and so on. These cars were sometimes taken to the valley, sometimes they started in the valley, ended up here. Law enforcement is continuously working together on matters. And we are grateful for the Safe Street Task Force and other task forces that we have in those partnerships. And right now, with all these incidents and so on, don't have enough homicide detectives. So we have to ask robbery detectives, burglary detectives, and other units to get involved, as well as we welcome any help our federal or state partners could give us.
So APD is still on the lead on these homicide investigations. Is the FBI coming in on the homicide, or are they backfilling other investigations that are happening in other areas?
They help us with a multitude of challenges in the community. And it could be from helping with tracking information down, extra manpower, just all types of things.
And are you able to say at this point publicly if the homicides, obviously there was another shooting in a park today, this morning, last night, are you able to tell us specifically, are they related? And obviously you guys put out a mixed alert telling people to be careful at night and be aware of your surroundings. I think that's good behavior anyway, is just to be always alert. But people keep coming and asking me, and I keep saying there's active investigation. They're not going to compromise that investigation. But people want to know if there's a serial killer in it.
And we want the public to be informed. That's why we do things like raids online and try to give the public information as most we can. We want that information to be verifiable and accurate information. The worst thing we can do is start rumors and speculate. It's not fair to the victims. It's not fair to their families. And we do our best by asking people. We put out notices. Wear your seatbelt. We know that wearing a seatbelt reduces injuries and the risk of serious injury and loss of life. Putting out a NITSL report asking for the community to be aware of their surroundings and so on is no different than that. At the holiday time, we ask people not to leave packages in their cars. Make sure you secure your cars. In the winter time, when people are warming up their cars, we ask them please get auto start systems. We're constantly reminding the community of the different needs, and that, I think that's a big role of the police department.
Specifically, would it be fair to say APD at this point, it's too early to say whether
not gonna speculate on any of this until there's verifiable facts.
You can say no comment, that's okay. I'm trying to get to the, you know, what I can tell people. You know, APD is not commenting yet. They're still investigating.
The thing you can count on from the police department, when we have information that has been verified and accurate and that we can share with the community, that's when we do it. We're not gonna, and I don't want to tell you no comment, because I live in the community too. I walk the coastal trail all the time and bike it, and my neighbors, and I talk to individuals and spend time with them. I have the same concerns as everyone else in the community. I want Anchorage to be a safe and secure place. Thank you.
And just wrapping up, Chief, and I touched on this at the beginning of my comments, and it's sort of why I asked you to give us an update. Clearly, and I appreciate all the statistics and everything you're doing, and don't take this as a criticism of the work you're doing, because I think you guys are doing an excellent job. But I think it's fair to say that there is a widespread belief in Anchorage among a lot of people that the city as a whole is becoming more lawless, more violent, and it's been a trend that I think the majority of Anchoradeites would say has been occurring for some time. You know, we see that with the reports in the paper, and a lot of it's anecdotal, but a lot of public safety is perception. And perception, you know, if there becomes a perception that the city is becoming more lawless, sometimes that's sort of self-fulfilling, and it becomes more lawless. And I know you're shorthanded, and we've been working on that, and, you know, good news on the academy. But other than the fact that we've, you know, committed to getting your numbers up again, is there anything that, you know, as public officials, we're getting calls all the time about this lawlessness problem, this perception, whatever it is, the deterioration of Anchorage. What else can we do that we're not doing? I mean,
so it's not just a deterioration. I don't think a deterioration happens. You see these spikes from time to time. Generally, these spikes occur every 8 to 10 years. And one thing you need to do, is this unique to Anchorage, or is this elsewhere? I can tell you that these similar type things are occurring in other cities around our nation. And not just in our nation, but around the world. It's trying times. Anchorage, you know, the most ironic thing about it, Anchorage is such a diverse and wonderful city. We embrace people. We give them a hand, help them up. We provide opportunity for them. The police department doesn't go around Town Park or through the neighborhoods and do unlawful searches and harass people and violate their rights and so on. We're very patient and work with them. I'm amazed. I've never seen a level of professionalism amongst a group of men and women in law enforcement than what exists right here in the Anchorage Police Department. I'm so darn proud of that. But is this good-naturedness and our tolerance of this part of it? Who knows? That's for scholars and others like yourself to have that conversation. And those conversations are so very, very important to have. Is it due to the recent changes in how Department of Corrections is handling people? I know just this past weekend we had a young lady that was put in there who stole a car and then escaped. Now, she was only in there for the one car, but is there multiple cars? You know, is that fair to others in the community? Yes, it's compassionate that you don't want to put her into a hard bed and have her subjected to other criminals and those poor influences, and you want to give her the benefit of the doubt, and you want to help her as much as you can. That's something we are really struggling with as a community. And what that proper balance will be someday is hard to say. But these are trying times for our state due to the economics. It's a trying time due to the good intentions that we have as citizens here in Anchorage and welcoming so many people that are different from ourselves. I think it's a multitude of things as well as what's going on in our world.
Well, I appreciate that, Chief, and just, you know, the invitation is out there. You know, we're here to help as much as we can in our role. Whatever the police department needs, we need to hear from you if there is anything we can do. Otherwise, we'll just keep funding the academies and hope that the manpower and everything you're doing, you know, curbs this. I will say that, you know, I had experience on another police department, and I am always in awe of how much more professional and sort of straight arrow legally the Anchorage Police Department is than the department I was on. It's been a much more difficult department to have been on. You do guys a very good job and very professional.
And the police
very-
department doesn't do that alone. That's because of the assembly. That's because of the administration, the good legal department giving sound advice. And the community having a voice saying, this is the way that we want our community to be. Anchorage has a lot to be proud of.
Well, and on that note, that's good.
Thank you.
And move on to the next item on the agenda. We have Chief Frost from Code Enforcement, and I just asked Mr. Frost to give us a quick update because it is that season and we've been seeing some complaints regarding political signs and right-of-ways, which falls into your area. And some people are frustrated that they just never seem to get action. If you can just tell us how we should respond when we get those complaints, or what can be done to at least get the illegal signs taken care of in a prompt manner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All the signs that are in the right-of-way are illegal per se. So given our resources and priorities, we address the public safety concerns first at the intersections and clear vision areas and those types of things. And the way we do that is we contact the campaigns initially and ask them to move them. If they're an immediate public safety risk and site hazard, we'll go move them back and simultaneously contact the campaigns. And then as resources allow, hopefully the campaigns will get them out of the right of way, put them back on private property where they are legal. And if they don't, then we will pick them up, hold them for 30 days, and then discard them if they're not reclaimed. And so as far as the public getting in touch with us, they can go to the municipal website, themuni.org, select the Anchorage Works. There's a complaint process that immediately gets to our dashboard and our computers. Alternatively, they can call the code enforcement hotline. That's 343-4141, and that's a similar process. It comes to us immediately and we'll address it.
Any questions on that? You guys got all your signs in order? Mr. Dunbar.
Actually, just because this is the first time I've heard somebody acknowledge it on the record, where is the sign graveyard?
Just looking.
Over by, yeah.
It's in our south parking lot.
I remember during the campaign,
Yeah.
one of ours disappeared, and we called and we were told there is no sign graveyard. It doesn't exist. Your sign is gone.
Yeah.
Good to know.
And
So
I'll-
you do open it for candidates if they want to retrieve
Sure.
signs.
Mr. Steele.
Yeah, I appreciate the work you do. I have had a couple calls recently with regards to gambling activities, folks renting a house and having weekly, I guess, gambling operations. It's not a big thing for me necessarily, but I'm sure for the neighborhoods it probably is. I don't have that data with me right now, but a woman called, told me of two of them, and she said she knows about them because her son gambles. But you know, you rouse those, they move, they go somewhere else, and they pop up, so on and so forth. So it's kind of an endless circle. They're out there.
Mr. Drain.
Chief, I just wanted to thank you for responding to some of the addresses I sent you in. We could tell they trimmed back the trees that were blocking the view, so thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Appreciate that.
You got a wide purview from political signs to gambling to trees.
We-
Impressive.
The gambling, we'll just refer it to our partners on my right.
Be the one that enforces marijuana laws too.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Thanks for being here. Let's move on to fire, and I guess it's Shift Battalion Chief Harvey.
Yes.
Going to give us a sort of a
blocks out of town. First thing that I've got for you is the 120-day statistics for Medicaid 182, which, as you know, are the BLS ambulances that we implemented last spring, working in conjunction with IAFF to secure the ability to flex our command to actually add two basic life support transport ambulances to downtown. It has shown a significant significant decrease. Medic 1's unit hour utilization's gone down 13%, Medic 3, 6%, Medic 4, 5.5%, Medic 5, 3%, and Medic 6 has gone down almost 2%. Currently, for that same 120-day time span, our highest unit hour utilization is Medic 6, which is over on the east side. Followed by Medic 3, Medic 4, Medic 1 has dropped to 4th. It was almost my 22-year career. Was number 1 with a bullet. We're seeing unit hour utilization statistics for Medic 81 and 82 of a little over 16%, which is right where we would expect that to be, given we put a 4-minute response bubble around them, if you will. So if a call that clearly triages out through the dispatch process as a basic life support response, then it would fell within that 4-minute window for one of those 2 ambulances to respond to, then they would get the assignment. Instead, in lieu of the next closest advanced life support ambulance. I know we're looking at tweaking that response time just fractionally, just adding a few seconds, depending on where our call volume is to that 4-minute window. We may bump that utilization up and then actually be able to equal out those other ambulances just a little bit more. One of the big concerns was that to guarantee we were sending the right resources to the right calls. We had the luxury that all of our ambulances were advanced life support in the city, so we sent a higher level of resources necessary to all our calls just by default, because every ambulance had a paramedic on. So one of the things we were most concerned about is making sure that with the change in our dispatch protocol, that we were getting the right resources to the right calls. There were 57 instances where and we put very tight restrictions on the protocols too that our firefighter used to be working here, since they've been working independently for the first time in their careers. So there 57 times they asked for, the crews got on scene and asked for a higher level of response to co-respond with them. Of those times, 7 instances we sent the closest ALS resource, which might have been an engine company or a truck company or rescue unit that had a paramedic on board with equipment and medications. So it falls well within, we were looking at about a 90%, right at the 90% mark of getting that correct triage at the dispatch level. So far that's been a good success. The other thing that Chief LeBlanc wanted me to speak to you, actually I'll open up for questions.
Mr. Peterson had a question then, Mr.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering, is the new fire station open? Are they already running ambulances and fire trucks?
Yes, Station 3 opened, I believe, on the 1st, was the first go live date. So it is the station that was on Airport Heights is now located on Braddock. So yes, we have shifted, and that's also going to impact why we may be incrementally moving that line for our BLS ambulances again from that 4-minute mark to a fractional greater.
Mr. Musk?
Thank you. Chief Harvey, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but obviously AFP is going to encrypted radios or something, and there's been a little bit of a concern expressed from the Cheyenne Volunteer Fire Department
So I know the plan is to get all the radios encrypted. I believe Judiac has the 2500, which is the same standard radio that our firefighters are issued. But I couldn't speak to when they will go to the same encryption mode essentially as us. And one thing to remember is, which that may create some interagency communication difficulties. Dispatch will still be able to hear essentially, so if there's an emergency, both encrypted and unencrypted, which provides that little feature of, and we're of safety. Today was a go live day. We still have over a third of our radios in the program. What we did is we captured one entire shift's radios because we have individually issued radios. We got those encrypted. We then made sure we had a radio for every seat on every apparatus because the rig radios have to also be touched, and that's going to take some time. Should be done by the end of the week. And so we have those encrypted radios out there. Today we're capturing all the unencrypted radios. They're going to the radio shop to do the program. But no, there's no new radios. They're just we're reprogramming our current radios.
So I need a little help in understanding, because my understanding was, I think I misspoke initially, my understanding was the radios that Judiac has are gonna have to be sent back, and there was like $144,000 fiscal note.
Oh.
So I don't know if something has to be added onto them. I don't know where that fiscal note's coming from. I just wanna ensure, one of the biggest challenges, and we've gone through this before.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Judiac, but essentially, we wanna make sure there's no gap, and we don't want anyone to be dropped, because if we have a major event and Station 11 can't talk to Judiac, and they're all kind of responding to the same event, Houston, we may have a major problem. And so I wanna make sure that AFD is absolutely proactive in ensuring
Yeah,
that.
what I can tell you is we have different zones. So Judiac has their own channel zone that are unencrypted. On our radios, we will be able to, I can currently go to the Judiac zone, and those are still unencrypted. So I can switch to Judiac or Girdwood, or if I have the dual, the Chiefs carry a dual band radio, I can talk to Matsu, Department of Forestry, I can go to those different zones. So that won't change. So like if right now, Judiac had a major event and they called for mutual aid and we responded, we would switch to the Judiac zone and we would have seamless communication. I don't know if I don't know what that fiscal note may be, and I don't know if their radios somehow, and vice versa, they switch to our zone when they're responding into a mutual aid with us. So our zone is the only one that's encrypted, that's being encrypted. It's not the entire radio, so I could still go to an unencrypted zone with Judiac, Girdwood, Division of Forestry, and still be able to have that communication.
And I know from Judiac's perspective, the chiefs that I spoke to anyways, they were very concerned about not being able to hear Anchorage and knowing what was going on. So there was a concern, but can you do me a favor and just give us, just in basic English, give us a breakdown of what this fiscal note is about and how the issue is being mitigated? Because my
I
understanding.
couldn't speak to the fiscal note.
Maybe you could ask Chief Syndrome if he'll send us an email or something, just
Sure.
something so we understand where this fiscal note's coming from and ensuring the steps that are being taken to make sure that Judiac is taken care of.
And I don't know that, the only thing I can speculate is that is being charged back from the radio shop, that the communications division, for labor, essentially,
My assumption was you heard was gonna go through the same thing as Judiac, so I don't really understand.
I'll have John, get with you and see.
I just wanna make sure I understand what it is. the
Yeah,
issue.
I know he was tasked with, shepherding our AFD's changeover, but I don't know, if he'll be able to answer that question exactly as well.
He was the name I was given as the go-to, so.
Yeah, I said he's the one that's shepherding our process of swap over, but I don't know. I couldn't begin to speak to this one.
Thank you.
So ma'am, also if you contact Trig Erickson at Communications Department, they are the ones that are the lead department that's doing the encryption. So,
What department is that?
Communications Shell. Trig Erickson.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions on the BLS ambulance utilization? And then the other thing you wanted me to talk to is just to give you a brief overview of the after action of the Street Creek Park and the role that AFD plays and probably played in that. So, like, initially, we got a 911 call on the 16th.
Chief? If you could, just to short circuit.
Short circuit version.
If there's any, what mostly we're looking for is if there are lessons learned from the fire, or AFD's perspective, things we need to change or things we need to do in the future, or if everything worked out according to.
Actually, it did go surprisingly well. We did a lot of, we hold annual exercises with DOF, tabletops. And usually our biggest concern coming out of that is our communications and how that's gonna work. We had the advantage this year, thank you to EOC, we were able to acquire additional 14 of the dual band radios, so all of the apparatus that I responded with on that initial, when we were mutual aid, we're able to communicate directly with DOF. We were able to go to their channels as well as on our channels. And so it went very well. We had really good interagency coordination. We were on the assignment for about 72 hours. The FMO for Division of Forestry called about 11 p.m. the night before the fire kind of blew up, and said they were getting erratic fire behavior, and they were going to be calling us for structural protection group for Rainbow. So I went down there with the incident commander that evening. We formulated a plan to meet at 7 in the morning, find out what resources there were, specific resources, and then gather a task force. Unfortunately, the fire behavior was more extreme than all of the forestry professionals had really seen for South Central at any time. It behaved like it shouldn't. So we got called about 3 in the morning for immediate response and went down there. But no, I can forward anytime that we accept a resource order and essentially do a deployment, whether it be Sockeye, Thunder River 2 years ago, part of that is we're hired out by the state at that point. And so we get evaluations when we basically check out. If anybody's interested, I can send you the evaluation that the task force received. So we might be knocking on the EOC store again this winter and try to get another handful of those radios. But no, from our perspective, we were very happy with that.
Questions for Chief?
There was a discussion about the lake up above that the individual was willing to install items or something. Has that happened? Or is that in the works?
I know that we're having communications, and what Chief LeBlanc asked me that City Manager Abbott was working on a solution to the hillside water issue, and that we would defer to Mr. Abbott. So.
The school also, I presume, which is right there by the Bear Valley Fire Department.
I'm not sure what you said.
Is that, are they a resource? Do they have water delivery to get, to support the fire?
Like a cistern or?
I'm just talking about quantity of water or do they play a part in terms of?
Not necessarily. Okay. There are serious high pressure hydrants on that section of the hillside.
Yeah.
But that, much like Chugiak or Birdwood, we have an ISO rating of 1.8. 1 meaning our hydrated areas is the highest it can be, and 8 is for our non-hydrated areas. And that, to get that 8 rating means that we've been able to demonstrate now this is for the structural part essentially bring our water to those fires.
I just take the middle
most-
school and the Bear Valley
Yeah,
Elementary School.
and wildfires are rarely, other than the ones that are caught early and we take care of. While big wildfires aren't put out necessarily by water. Time and weather and terrain and things like that are really what happens in those large wildfires, so we don't experience very early.
I don't see other questions. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. Moving on, the next topic is the Health Department. That's got Steve Ashman, but I don't see Steve, so I imagine it's
Steve jumped,
Melinda.
that was last time.
Okay.
Stuck with me too.
Not a problem. Ms. Friedman's gonna discuss, some of the concerns that were raised at our last assembly meeting with Mr. Heimel, regarding the, inspections of various vendors, some of these, markets. So, take it away, Ms. Friedman.
Do you want me to go over the highlights of your dashboard as they are provided? I can just hit that briefly.
Sure.
We have a slight uptick in the utilization of the Anchorage Safety Patrol Safety Center the month of July. As you can see, we have decreased the utilization of the ASP and ASC over this past year, which I think is very good news. There's many various interpretations of why the intakes are have been reduced. Some of that is probably due to the increased permanent housing that we've discussed before in this committee, as well as the extensive work done by the homeless coordinator and our administration on producing more units in which to place people, as well as specialized vouchers for vulnerable populations. So we'll keep you informed as information comes forward on both the utilization of ASP and the varying reasons that we may have reduced utilization. But all in all, that is positive. Do you have any questions on the dashboard for the ASP or ASC? Great. You can, the next dashboard
Excuse me,
is,
Mr. Wilton has a question.
Is this, are you talking about this right now?
yes, this form.
Just a couple things. So you've got unduplicated clients, roughly 500. So that's about, on average, 4 per person. So you have some that must just be nonstop.
Pardon, say that?
We have 500 unduplicated clients. So basically, but you had 2,000 plus calls.
Yes.
So that's averages 4 calls just for this small group of people.
Yeah, well, we do have,
What's the
repeat
range?
users, and although by and large, the repeat users have gone from, let's say, a high of 275 intakes for one person over the course of years, down to about 170 intakes for some of the high users. As we've discussed before, the population is also getting younger that's utilizing the ASP, so their level of addiction may not be as progressed as folks that are in their 50s or 60s. So there are some changes in the population that we're serving.
Yeah, Mr. Wilton has a follow-up.
Okay, so, and then looking at this means of arrival and place of birth. So
Yes.
on place of birth, you have about 60% are not born in Alaska, but not here. So that sounds like, so all these people are coming from other places to.
Various places
but
that can be.
That may not be true, because the general population, most of us weren't born here.
Right, well, that's true.
Do you know the
But
comparable stats?
That's true. But mostly we're trying to look at, are folks primary residents of Anchorage, or are they coming from other places within Alaska? And that's one of the questions that people have asked us to report on. So we cannot, I mean, you've got 98 people that originally came from outside of Alaska, 298 that were not necessarily born in Anchorage, and then 96 who identify as coming primarily from the Anchorage Bowl. So that's how it breaks down.
Mr. Dunbar.
So this is Rodney, I'm sorry, you might be the wrong person to ask this, somebody from the administration. Do we have any preliminary numbers on the point in time count? We good?
Nancy was back.
Oh, hey,
no, she's
Nancy,
still back.
Nancy, do we have any preliminary numbers?
I have data that came in from 7 places, I'm still unduplicating it.
Okay.
Should be ready in the.
Okay, thank you.
Are you good, Mr. Wilton?
Yes.
Right. You can go on to the Animal Care Control Center dashboards. So again, we have tried to report to you what we think might be most interesting. So if there are categories that you would like more information or specific breakdowns, we're happy to provide that for you. So this is the overview for the period from February through July. And as you can see, there are certain areas, welfare checks and things like that, noise complaints that have been reduced since June, but we do typically experience a spike in activity related to animal care control calls in the summer months, as you can imagine, as well as it looks like we have an uptick in injured animals calls, dead animals in public places, and a reduction in loose animals. But these are slight, and we have a great deal of interest at any time in the care part of animal care and control. And so if you would like information specifically about that, we're happy to provide that.
Mr. Dunbar.
I have I'm sorry, this might not be, again, a question, you know the statute too. I remember when I was outdoor knocking, I had a conversation with a woman who had seen a dog bite a child in the next house over, but it wasn't her child. And so can you report, does it have to be your child or you personally, do they have to go and report? Can you report a dog attack on somebody else if they don't want, that family didn't want to file a report on their dog, and she was concerned because she was worried that dog was going to attack her child next. So in that kind of situation, what can a constituent do?
Yes, any citizen can call, any concerned person can call about a concern with an animal, whether it's a loose animal, whether it's an animal that appears to have attacked a child, an adult, another animal. All of those calls we welcome, and then we will investigate the situation.
And if, let's say they go and they find, yes, this dog did bite this child, but that person, that family doesn't want to pursue that claim, is it like a criminal action where it's the state and the perpetrator, in this case an animal, or does the victim themselves have to pursue the claim?
The victim themselves do not have to pursue the claim. There are certainly cases of that nature where a family pet attacks a child or another dog on their own property, etc. And so that would all be fully investigated. It would, at the time that the call comes in, the code enforcement officer will do full research, and that may involve talking with witnesses, etc., within the same family or neighbors, etc., but we will fully investigate it. It's not particularly connected to who the caller might be.
Yeah. I think we all got an email in the last couple of weeks from someone who's very extensive in the history of a place that takes in strays or something. I wasn't quite sure what their role was, but the people emailing said that this is a horrible operation and they don't feed the dogs and the dogs are unhealthy and so on. Are you aware of cases like that? What do you guys do?
We are very aware of cases like that. Again, we take calls from folks that own pets, from individuals that are trying to seek adoptions from pets. We have extensive information about the particular letter writer and their particular concerns, and related to the facility that they were referring to, that is, all of those complaints are fully investigated, and a recent notice of violation was issued to the provider, and that is an open investigation.
So, I mean, and you could shut this operation down, and then the pets are handled by someone else, or what?
Right. It's whenever we conduct an investigation, we go into the facility and look at. We can require veterinarian records. We can require financial documents. We can require various documents related to each animal that is being served or provided care in that facility. We also look at we have building code enforcement professionals that come in and look at the facility itself. So it's usually a multi-layered investigation depending on the types of concerns that are brought to our attention. And I can assure you that every type of analysis related to these particular concerns and complaints has been and is currently being investigated. Because it can be the facility itself, it may have inadequate ventilation, inadequate electrical, etc., lighting. All of these elements have to be analyzed very thoroughly, and that takes time to do that. But their specific situation, very, very proactive in looking at analyzing it.
Thanks.
In the interest of time, Melinda, could we, unless there's other questions about any of that, Ms. Nabel?
I just have one. It's about noise complaints. I know I'm segueing a little bit. I have now received phone calls from Mr. Peterson's constituent. And so what efforts are, is the department or APD making to try to come up with a solution to deal with some of these noise complaints, specifically coming from vehicles?
Coming from vehicles, that I'll segue and pass the baton over to Chief Tolley, because when it involves vehicles, that is related to APD response versus like loud football games or concerts or such like that our environmental health department responds to.
Yeah, that's the boom box issue.
And we have been dealing with this
Yes.
good.
Yes. Actually, the current ordinance is insufficient because of the way it's written, that there has to be a certain rhythm, and you can hear the words to the songs. So we've had our traffic sergeant look at that. We are working with the municipal attorney's office on a remedy to that, so that would allow us to cite those individuals.
Mr. Train?
Since you're working under regulation, would you look at the type of equipment we would need to use to cite the individual? Because that was a problem with the old ordinance. You guys did not have the equipment.
When they were talking about decibels and stuff like that, all right, but I think the proposal is if we can hear it 25 feet away from the vehicle, and that seems to be a better fix.
Okay, does every police officer have the same level of hearing capability?
Well,
Because if I was an attorney, that's one question I'd be
yeah,
asking.
I mean,
Show
what is
me
the
their
definition of
hearing.
hear, So, I mean, if I hear it at 25 feet, does that mean?
Well, a lot of our police officers are war veterans, and their hearing is a little bit impaired.
I'm a Vietnam era
Just
myself,
saying,
so
as we
I
start to
get
work
that.
on this thing, we've got to figure out, because we get calls all the time from people. A boom box went by, do something about that person's side.
Right. We understand the frustration.
But
What's it taking, $300?
Actually, it goes up, well, the current one is, like I said, it's insufficient. I think it's like $3, $5, and $1,500 for the first, second, and third.
But it's important to report each one of these nuisance, and so that we can have an accurate assessment. And we also have some other tools that we're looking at right now to deal with these multiple calls to the same locations. So we're taking all different approaches to it.
Mr. Peterson heard you from over there, and he has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been an ongoing issue for me for a couple of years, and we actually got an email yesterday from a gentleman who's complaining about loud mufflers and loud motorcycles. And so if we're able to figure out a way to enforce loud boombox cars, we probably would be able to do the same for loud mufflers or that type of thing as well. Is that correct?
You would think, but we used to have it that you couldn't modify it any further than what was from the manufacturer, but the state has taken that away from us.
Actually, the assembly changed that. I
Oh, I
remember
beg your
you
pardon.
did it. I'm guilty.
Yeah.
Good. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Freeman on any of the dashboard issues? Seeing none, if you could tell us about the inspections.
Yes. So we have a handout for you, the cottage food FAQs. We've provided that for you, as well as there are extra copies in the back. And so I just want to intro this just briefly. We have a partnership with food vendors. This is between public health safety as well as the business owners that produce the foods. And we are very fortunate in Anchorage to have a very robust farmers market, level of farmers markets, and an interest in it both as a consumer and as an entrepreneur. So although we have been inspecting farmers markets for many years, the level of products and the variety of products has increased. So today you'll hear us talk about kombucha, you'll hear us talk about kefir and other products that you may or may not be familiar with. And just to remind all of us that food inspections are required from restaurants as well as farmers markets. And it is a science. So I brought one of our scientists, thank goodness, here to talk with you. And this is Shelley Griffiths. She is our program supervisor for our environmental health department. So not only does she cover food inspections and is an expert in that area, she also covers noise complaints, air quality, and restaurant inspections, etc., pools and spas, and so there's a variety of science applied to all of these endeavors. So I just wanted to introduce that. You'll probably have specific questions, but hopefully this will provide you with some information. So I've asked Shelley to give you a briefing on what our typical process is for helping farmers market food vendors, or what we call cottage food providers, to succeed in selling their wares. So Shelley, you're on.
Thank you, Melinda. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Assembly and the Public Safety Committee, and thank you for having me here today. We did prepare this frequently asked questions flyer for you so that you can take this with you. And it does tell you what some cottage foods that are allowed are, and that would be like breads, pies, and cookies, and some that are not allowed, like dried meats, cream pies that have to be refrigerated, and other types of things like that. So we are extremely excited about the farmers markets expanding. We have a new one in Mountain View, if you haven't been over there, so that gives those people in that neighborhood an opportunity to get fresh fruit and vegetables, as long as they're not chopped up, because that requires a permit. And vendors are required to obtain a permit with a variance, because our current food code, the 1660.140 food, refers to the 2005 model food code from the FDA. And that one specifically states, it's 3-201.11, that food prepared in a private home may not be used or offered for human consumption in a food establishment. So the variance was developed to allow cottage foods, because we really do want to give those local business entrepreneurs the opportunity to start their cottage food operations. So moving on, potentially hazardous foods are those foods which have a water activity or a pH above a certain level, and they support the growth of microorganisms. So those are some prohibited foods that are listed for you. All the cottage food variances also come with a permit. The permit identifies that that owner has completed the necessary food handling safety training. They have a business license if required based on their total annual sales. And it allows for investigation should an illness or an outbreak related directly with their food happen. And in the future code revisions, the plan is to remove the need for the variance through approved amendments to the code, which will allow for cottage foods. So prior to approval, the cottage food businesses provide a menu of items that they wish to sell for review. And this, we can ensure that there's no restricted items on that menu when they submit it to us. And if there are, we can discuss it with them and talk about why they would be restricted or what they could do to allow it. Inspectors may also ask for the recipes, and it's not step-by-step how you make it, it's more the prevention side of the house. If there's a need, such as kefir and kombucha specifically, they are extremely dangerous products when not handled correctly. We ask for a hazard analysis and critical control plan. Specifically, kombucha will actually develop alcohol in some circumstances, and it can be above the 0.05 levels. So we definitely work very, very strongly with those kefir and kombucha places. And that ensures that it's managed in a manner that will prevent the cross-contamination and the alcohol contents checked, and that it's not going to make people sick. So the inspections at the farmers markets have happened. All the inspectors get standardized using FDA standardization, and this also is what the state uses, and it's standard practice to inspect all restaurants and food vendors at farmers markets. So if a cottage food is for sale at the local farmers market, the inspector makes sure that the requirements are met for the product being sold. So the vendor needs to have the permit and the required signage for the inspector to let the consumers be aware of that type of product. So the inspector also has to check the labeling, and this includes products being sold. They have to have any allergens or include such as nuts, like there's so many peanut allergies out there, soy and milk and eggs and those types of things. So they check the labeling for that, and then product sampling is not allowed since these are made in a home. So when a non-permitted vendor is identified selling a product at a local food market, the inspector's first step is they're going to educate them. They're going to talk to them about their food, why it requires a permit, what that would entail for them to come in and get that permit. talk about the current regulations that are already written, and, you know, just have that little discussion with them, get that initial contact started with them. So then if the products are safe when they find them, like cookies or cakes, they may allow them to continue selling them at that time and come in the following business day to obtain their permits. So if they're not, and it is one of those types of products like kefir or kombucha that needs additional testing and monitoring, or if it's a fermented or acidified product like pickled vegetables, for example, then they would be asked to remove those off the shelf and continue to sell other products that are allowed at that time, and then we could have them come in and review that process at that time. So on the back, if you look at the cottage food production guidelines, that's more for in the home, and it talks about not having children or pets in the kitchen while you're cooking and doing the proper cleaning before you start cooking.
Mr. Trini, and then Mr. Dunbar, and Mr. Peterson, I'm gonna ask you all to be very quick because we have one more item we need to get to in only 50 minutes.
Are you letting anybody know about this? Because quite frankly, I've lived here 50 years and never heard about it.
Thank
So
you,
I'm
Mr.
just
Craig.
wondering.
I am very excited you asked
How
that
the public
question.
know?
We are actually going to hold 2 classes in October for people who are interested in opening their cottage food business. And that's going to be, right now, we're looking at a couple of dates. Amory Laleke, our PAO, will be putting out that information. But we are going to actually hold 2, one in the afternoon and one in the evening.
Okay. And the cost is $100 a year per permit?
No, sir.
How much?
Right now, it's $50 for the variance, and I believe it's $230, but don't quote me on it because I'm not absolutely certain about that. But that's for the entire year. And
We need to make sure we get all these down before we go out to the public, and I would suggest you go to community councils and start doing a speaking circuit with the community council of the federation, so we get the message out, because we've got these regulations, and you're gonna enforce them. We need to get a mechanism to let the public know what's going on with them and why we're doing it. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dunbar?
So I have a series of very quick questions. First of all, thank you for preparing this, and I was gonna actually suggest what Dick just did. If you could email this document or Amory to the FCC, the Federation of Community Councils, and they can distribute it out to all our community councils. I think, especially in Muldoon and Mountain View, there's a lot of overlap between the community councils and the farmers market community. So some quick questions. You mentioned there's gonna be a regulatory change here. What's the ETA on that regulatory change?
I don't know, a few months ago, about 5 months ago, we submitted that to our municipality legal, and we're just waiting for their review on that.
Okay, so you mentioned that sampling isn't allowed.
It's not allowed.
So if our position is, safe to consume, then why isn't sampling allowed? And is that a state or a local regulation?
It's the National Association of County and City Health Officials who actually drafted the original guidelines for cottage foods. The Association of Food and Drug Officials also drafted it, and that's available for you on the countertop. And it is a standard across all 50 states that we do not allow cottage foods to provide sampling.
So it's a federal regulation or it's a state law?
It's a standard within the industry. And the reason for that is if we allow you to sample your cookies, somebody's gonna wanna come around and sample pickles. Once you open a jar of pickles, they must be refrigerated because it becomes a potentially hazardous food at that time. So easier to make it standard for all cottage food vendors.
Okay, and so the last question, and I think this gets to what Steve brought for us. Has there been an increase in enforcement or inspection rather on the farmers market this summer?
Not at all. We have one person who is, we only have one vendor at this time who has not come in to get their permit, but all other vendors have been very cooperative and came in. It's been very good this year.
Thanks very much.
Peterson and Mr. Steele?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so is there a plan to inspect cottage food production kitchens, like the restaurants are inspected and the food wagons are inspected?
We inspect only within the municipality because that is our region. So outside the municipality, the state of Alaska does not inspect it. They do not have the people to do it. And that is directly from my coworker at ADDC. And so we do inspect only on opening and if there is a complaint or a outbreak related with the food. So it's not an annual, it's only opening.
So you're planning to, and are you already inspecting the private kitchens where this cottage food is being produced?
Only the opening inspections.
The opening?
Yes, sir, that's it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
My question is just simple, you may have already answered it in terms of how are our farmers markets doing?
They're great. I love them. I work really closely with a lot of the organizers for the different farmers markets around here. And Mountain View, I know when they opened, we met with them a few times because they had some questions about how to make sure vendors had their health permits. And they're doing really good. We've got a lot of great fruit. I don't know if y'all seen it, but it's zucchini that's like 2 feet long. It's crazy. So I know I buy a bunch of stuff there. So.
Thank you.
Can I clarify one thing? I want to make sure that we can distinguish the difference between all the samples that we enjoy when we go to Costco. And so those are produced in industrial kitchens that have been approved and inspected probably multiple times. And so that's the difference is in a home cottage industry, we just inspect that one time if they have sought a permit and then we issue the variance. So that's why, that's one of the differences between producing samples on site versus a store or something like that.
We are running close on time, but Mr. Heimel, I wanted to give you an opportunity. Have the questions you've had been answered, or is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, not at all. I was under the impression that under state law, a lot of this was not required, and that the municipality is choosing to make these requirements.
Well, as I stated before, the ASC 1660.140.
Municipal code.
Yes, sir. Refers to the food code that is the 2005 FDA model food code, and the specific wording I gave, and that is 3.201.11B, which means that no home cooked food is allowed. And that's why we offer the variance.
And variance then is something that is, that they pay extra money for, and they're vetted then by the health department. Is that how that works?
We have the variance.
And there's a one-time variance for $50, and then there's another one for $300. Is that right?
It's actually prorated, so if you applied for a permit variance at this time, it would be prorated since we're halfway through, more than halfway through the year, so it would be a reduced cost. With the food code revisions, we want to change that so it's streamlined, it's easier for vendors, and it will be a much improved process, including this opportunity to educate potential vendors or consumers. So we hope you will be engaged in that process. There will be a great deal of stakeholder involvement, so everyone is clear and we work together to create the new code with our
legal. It still costs $300.
At this time, it would not cost $300, but at the beginning of the year.
And the new one does not cost that much as well. It's a license is what it's listed as.
Thanks. And to the extent you can, if you give your information to Mr. Heimel, if there are further questions, you guys can follow up offline. Mr. Dunbar, do you have a question?
Just very quick point on that. I think we're all driving towards the same thing. Working in the farmers markets, they have very small margins and very small numbers. So to the degree which you can hold down the cost of that permit, I would very much appreciate it.
Farmers markets are seasonal. I'm sorry. So they're already lower than the 230.
Great.
And we try to do it in pieces, Mr. Dunbar's policy, so if you can do that. Thank you for that. We need to move on. Under new business, we have a new proposed ordinance that Mr. Trainee has been working and Mr. Sugarwood has been drafting for quite some time on recycled materials and requirements. If you can give us I appreciate you forwarded it. Most of us have already seen it and appreciate that.
Before I launch into that, Mr. Foley has a shorter topic that's not on the agenda that.
Chairman, want to go just quick. Always for Mr. Foley.
The Assembly is probably aware that the ACLU is submitting a public records request to the administration regarding cell phone trackers or site simulators, or Kingfisher or Stingray.
Yes.
We are working on the response to that. That is going to take some time. We are blowing the dust off the old boxes, finding the records, reviewing the records, making necessary redactions. We're aware that it's generated a lot of public interest, and we have seen some fears expressed, which are frankly not particularly well founded. So the full response is going to come in response to that public records request, but we wanted to take a brief moment to let the members of the Assembly, the media, and the public know the story that those documents will ultimately tell ahead of the full response. So I'd like to turn it over to DC Gillen.
Thank you. I've been authorized to disclose some of this information. It will become part of this. So in 2009, the Assembly authorized the purchase of the Kingfish. APD did purchase one of those. The device does not have the capability, I think you may have heard some of the fears, that we can listen to your conversations or, track your text. That is not the capability of that equipment that we have. The device only helps us locate the cell phone using the tower technology. It's most commonly like an app called Find My Phone or something like that. It's very similar in technology like that. We did have a draft policy that we operated by that required the use of a warrant, and we used the equipment about a dozen times. There was only one incident that we did not use it with the warrant, and that was under an emergency situation where we're trying to help locate a lost person. I think, let's see what else was there. The device is outdated. It's no longer of use to it. We haven't used it in over a year. And if we ever plan on getting something similar, we'll use the same type of purchasing process that we did by going through the assembly. So that in a nutshell would be.
Mr. Training has one question.
You bet.
Are we paying an annual appropriation amount to update our software? Or we just buy it, it's been dead since we bought it?
It was close to being outdated when we bought it.
That was very simple, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just a clarifying comment. So you said you had a draft policy that you operated by. My understanding for that in past tense is because you no longer use the equipment.
That's correct.
With that, the exciting world of scrap metal featuring.
Thanks. My companies are super down. No, you won't be, this is gonna be exciting. So, although attorneys are known for brevity, I can tell you that we will not be covering this in 5 minutes. So maybe we can be higher on the agenda next time. But everybody should have a copy of what we're calling the scrap metal ordinance. What started this was a concern from this committee about copper theft. And Lieutenant Henning is here from the Property Crimes Division. He's got a graphic and pass out to members of the assembly, but as you'll see, and this is one of the things we'll update in the ordinance, the second whereas says that from January 2015 to March 2016, now that would be August 2016, and that there's been 91 cases involving theft of used copper. They get that statistic by basically doing a word search of crime reports. They don't have a neat little file for copper thefts, but it's pretty significant. The other part of this ordinance involves precious metal theft and the secondhand sale of precious metal theft. It's basically a record-keeping requirement. The primary part, and I'll just skip ahead because of time shortage, but it's in section 3. It's a record-keeping requirement for scrap metal dealers. So like I said, the focus is on copper, but it does include other non-ferrous or non-iron metals because that's the ones that have value. Copper theft is a national problem, and it seems to come and go somewhat with the economy, with how many copper mines are open, things like that. The part of this ordinance that deals with the scrap metal is almost a word-for-word copy of something that the state legislature passed in 2014 that became effective in 2015. One of the differences in ours is that they actually make it a Class A misdemeanor if you don't do the record keeping that you're supposed to. The way we've written this, we've made it a violation. And you'll see in the last page there's what I think are just suggested amounts for the violation right now. Like many of these things, the idea isn't to collect money and fine people and find them guilty of things. The idea is to create a tool that the police can use to help investigate copper thefts and likewise precious metal thefts. One of the things we've added to this that comes out of our pawn ordinance, you'll see on page 3 under section 3, it's 10.20.041D, is reports to the police. So besides the record keeping itself, the licensee would need to make whoever is the person that falls under the need to make a weekly report to the chief of police summarizing all transactions. And that would be on a form provided by the police department or any form acceptable to the department. One of the things Lieutenant Henning can talk about more is something that they like called Leads Online, which is electronic based and apparently relatively easy to use and a very handy tool for them. There are certainly more details to this, and we will want to spend more time on this because, as you see from draft being stamped all over it, this is very much a working document, a draft document. There's other things that the police potentially would like to have added that didn't get into this write-up because we were talking about them this morning. And
that will work well because Mr. Trainee informs me he's probably just gonna schedule a work session on this issue.
I'll have a work session.
That's
come
probably
up
the
as soon
best
as
deal.
Todd, and let's keep working on this so we can get a document we can bring to work session.
Appreciate you bringing it to us, and I also have to apologize, I skipped over you, Mr. Fitch.
That's okay.
Is there anything real, you wanna get out here in this last minute?
Just, September is Preparedness Month, and we ask everybody to please review their family plans and also review their Mercy kits.
Perfect. We'll put you at the top of the agenda next time.
Okay.
With that, we are adjourned.